A Summer of Silk Moths by Margaret Willey, Chapter 3, Moth Journal. What a mysterious insect the moth is. What a completely misunderstood creature. The more I learn, the more I want to learn. Ceracopia are amazing, but there are many other spectacular saturnids living in the northern woods. Gorgeous moths. Moths I can't wait to see. Polymius, Promethea, Automeris, Io, and the magnificent Actius luna, uniquely pale green. Mrs. Shelton said that seeing one in flight is like seeing a huge airborne leaf. It seems like the moon is some sort of navigational device for moths, although there is not total agreement on how moths react to moonlight. Different Lepidopterists have different explanations. Most, but not all, believe that because moonlight is so distant, the optical illusion of light from the other sources, like, say, a light bulb, create a kind of disorientation in the way a moth's brain is wired, making them confused and so more likely to exhibit the crazy flight pattern and eventual self-destruction that we humans misinterpret as a kind of death wish. It's true that the majority of moth species cannot resist the pull of any bright light after dusk. They're sucked out of the darkness by artificial light. This is why many people feel that moths are drawn to their own death, hence the expression, like a moth to the flame. This is, and the fact that moths are associated with night has contributed to a sense that moths are sinister or represent something scary or unpleasant, something about death and darkness, in contrast to butterflies, which are a universal symbol of innocence and hope. Of course, this is the opposite of how I feel about moths. They outnumber butterflies by 10 to 1 and are more diverse and mysterious. Mrs. Shelton saw me in the lab yesterday after school and asked, "How is my favorite young votary?" She said it like it was a compliment, and I pretended to know what she meant, but of course I had to look up the word later. Here's the definition. Votary, a person who is devoted to any game, study, pursuit, or religion. A devoted student or supporter. I am a votary of moths. 3. Windows. The next morning I came up from my workshop and saw through the office window that Abe was in the parking lot lifting a wide, flat box into the back of his Jeep. I recognized the box as the smallest of the half-dozen new windows we have purchased for the lodge. "Where are you taking that?" I called through the screen. "I made a little room for Nora at the cabin," he said, easing the box down carefully. He waved for me to come outside. When I was beside him, I repeated, "A little room?" "You know that space that used to be a pantry off my kitchen? I made it into a little room for her. All it needs now is a window." It took me a moment to digest this news. "Well, I guess that means she's forgiven you," I said gloomily. "Oh, no, she still hasn't forgiven me," Abe reported. "She still won't even talk to me, but I'm hoping we get past that once I move her into her own room and convince her she's welcome to stay." "Okay, but when you say stay, I don't know for how long, Pete. Until she figures out this thing with her mom. One day at a time. Today we're putting in a window." It was on the tip of my tongue to ask him if he needed my help, but I stopped myself because there was now the totally unfamiliar possibility that he would say no, didn't need my help, and there was the added complication that I didn't really want to help. Why should I help Abe change his perfect cabin for a girl who just wouldn't appreciate it? I stood at the side of the Jeep with my arms on my sides until something else occurred to me, another jolt. I realized that Abe had come to Riverside without Thor. He never went anywhere without Thor. The dog was his shadow. "You left Thor with Nora?" I asked, incredulous. Abe smiled. "She likes him. She remembers that lab her mother had when she was little, Thor's little brother, Atlas. Atlas was Paul's dog, Pete. Imagine that Nora remembers Paul's dog." "I thought she wasn't speaking to you," I grumbled. "She told me this before," he explained. He meant before I screwed everything up, bringing Nora to Riverside. He climbed behind the wheel of the Jeep, shook his head in amazement, and said, oh man, she reminds me so much of Paul." I stood in the lot as he drove away, protesting silently. "How can she remind you of Paul? People love Paul. My whole life I've heard how much everybody loved Paul. Who could love this girl?" Gramps caught me studying an old photograph in the back of the hallway at our house, a photo I had walked by every day of my life, but never really looked at before. It was a framed black and white picture of two girls riding a speckled horse. The girl in front had narrow shoulders and cowboy boots and a round face. Impossibly, Graham. And the other one was taller, with long legs and bare feet and a halo of curls. This girl looked strikingly like Nora, except for the way she was smiling. Her head tilted, eyes crescents, probably laughing. It was hard to imagine that Nora I met smiling like that. I had never seen her full-out smile. Gramps came up behind me, and I put a hand on my shoulder. What are you going to bring that girl around for us to meet? I searched my mind for an excuse, and I came up with the truth, something that often happened with him. Probably never, Gramps. We haven't exactly hit it off. He tilted his head, as though unwilling to believe this. I don't like her, I insisted. She has a really big chip on her shoulder. Maybe she's had the sort of life that puts a chip on a girl's shoulder, Gramps suggested. Meaning what? Well, I've been remembering some things about the girl's mother. Very pretty woman, high-spirited, but didn't get along with Abe. They had this trouble between them, right from the start. It only got worse after the accident. I'm honestly quite surprised that woman would ever let her daughter come back here. I don't think she actually did let her come here. I think it was more of a running away kind of situation. He lifted his eyes to mine, a level gaze. Running away is not something that brings out the best in a person, Peter. I turned my attention back to the photograph. Two pretty girls together on horseback in what surely had been an easier time in the universe. Gramps pulled my head close to his. We were the same height, and whispered in my ear, "Bring her round, son. Do it for your grandmother." The next morning I saw that Abe had arrived at the visitor center ahead of me and took it as a positive sign, a sign that things at Riverside might be returning to normal. But once inside, to my complete dismay, I found Nora herself sitting behind Abe's desk. She had the chair revolved all the way around so her back was to me, but I could see that she was using a new cell phone, listening to someone before she exclaimed, "I heard what you said. I'm not stupid. If that's true, then why hasn't she called me?" She gave the chair another spin, saw me standing in the doorway, and scowled. "Hold on a minute," she said into the receiver, then to me. "What are you doing here?" I kept my cool. "Last time I checked, this was my office." "I know that. I mean, what are you doing just standing here eavesdropping?" My reply was to toss my backpack from the entryway to the top of my desk, and it landed with a crash, scaring bones and feathers. I found Abe in the kitchen making a pot of coffee. "What's she doing in this office?" I demanded. Abe's tone was calm. "She won't be long. She's talking to her sister. It looks like her mom is somewhere in the Upper Peninsula, staying with some cousins, and she's trying to—" "Abe, it's my office, and I'm not about to share." "Relax. I'll have her out here in just a few minutes." He put a hand on my shoulder, reassuring me. "I'm giving her the grand tour today. She's never even laid eyes on the St. Joe River, Pete. Did you notice her shoes?" He pushed me backward slightly so I could see that Nora, still on the phone, had her long legs stretched out and her feet propped on the old radiator behind Abe's desk. Hiking boots, heavy soles, wood socks. I looked back at Abe. "What has this girl done to your brain?" I wondered. Aloud I said, Do what you have to do, man. I'll be in the basement." From the stairs I could hear Nora's voice. "Were you ever listening? He says I can't stay here as long as I want." I entered my sanctum, took a few deep breaths in the clean dampness, and tried to block out what had just happened. For distraction, I began by putting the moth cases into rows on the floor, arranging and rearranging them, and deciding how I would eventually cluster them onto a display panel, all the while listening for sounds of departure above me. I wanted them gone to that river Nora had never seen, because I was going to leave right after they did. I needed to take a drive. There was something that I needed to see for myself, something real and concrete that would perhaps help me get a grip on what was happening to my world. Never before had I walked into Abe's cabin with a feeling that I was trespassing. The cabin had always had a kind of clubhouse feeling, a clubhouse built 10 years ago by Abe for a very small club, him and me. The rooms were small and low-ceilinged, with cedar beams and pine door frames, bird feeders at windows, hardwood floors. I especially loved Abe's kitchen, all whites and hunter greens, with a pine sideboard for a table and a little pantry off to one side of the stove. The pantry door was closed, and I gathered my nerve. Pushing it open, no more pantry. There were no shelves, no canned goods, no sacks of dog chow. I stared inside into a narrow room, almost like a train car, with a cot against one wall, a small table at the head of the bed, and a lamp and a clock on the table. The room smelled of a newly sawed pine and a scent I had noticed on Nora, her fruity perfume. The bed was made with a flowered comforter and 2 new pillows in ruffled cases. There was a basket of clean new clothes in the corner. Just beyond the foot of her bed was a perfect little window, framed in new pine. It faced east, so Nora would see the stars from her bed at night and wake up to an early sun. Under her bed was a small, dirty gym bag, hardly big enough for a few days of travel, empty now. Nora had gotten on the bus with only that duffel and a phone number. She'd headed north to Abe with no idea what sort of reception awaited her, or even what sort of person he was. What kind of girl does that? And why?